Welcome, Sharon. It's really nice to see you. Hopefully it's not too cold up there. It's cold here in Texas, and we're about 100 miles south of you, I think.
It's cold. It's been cold all week.
Yes, and I'm like, I'm not ready for winter yet. And
Oh
right now
Lord.
it's yeah, it's 44 degrees. I'm like, oh no, 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 no.
Really? Yeah.
Yes. Well, welcome tonight, and we're going to. It's a full house, so I have some questions for you.
Awesome.
And first of all, welcome everybody, and thank you, Lady Sarah, for telling everybody about the muting and how we're going to do the Q&A after we have our discussion with Sharon. But first, for the people who, I know there's not very many here, but for the people who don't know how you got started writing, could you just tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. I was always a daydreamer, but I never in a million years thought about writing down the stories that were always in my head until I had a job I absolutely hated. And kind of one night came home from work and started writing one of the stories that had been in my head for about a year. And I really got hooked on the process. I've always been a really avid reader and loved getting lost in a book, but I never thought about writing them till then. And actually writing got me out of a really bad marriage too. So it kind of saved my life. It's a sad story and a happy one too.
Yeah. So when you first started writing, were you doing it longhand? Did you have a typewriter?
Yeah, I had a typewriter, but that was back in the day when everything was carbon paper. There was no such, there wasn't even whiteout, really. And so I wrote in longhand on yellow legal pads and then would type it. And it took forever. And when I finally finished the first book that I wrote, full-length book, I had retyped it 7 times to even get it clean. Yeah. So, and it was awful. And I stuck it under the bed, but it was my first.
So how long was it between you writing your first or second book and actually trying to get it published?
I wrote my first and second book in the early 80s. And like I said, stuck them under the bed. And I kind of let it slide until the mid 80s. And we kind of had a family tragedy. My dad and my sister died within 2 months of each other. And it was it was what it was. And I realized then that if I had a dream, that waiting on perfection, waiting for the perfect time, waiting for when I could do more, spare myself and not cheat the family out of my time. I just decided I mattered a little bit more than that. And I wanted to follow my dream. And that's when I really got serious about it, joined a little local writers group and went from there. But it was about 4 years. It was 1989 before I wrote another full-length anything. And I didn't send it anywhere until the early 90s. And the first place I sent it bought it. But I learned, I've been, 7 years of little conferences and work and going to my little writers group. And I had learned everything I needed to know about plot and pacing and characterization and point of view. I didn't even know what that meant. You know what I'm talking about.
Right. Yeah. It's something that's writers know about, but readers know when it's missing or when it's messed up.
Oh, yes, exactly. They don't know the word for it, but they know there's something wrong here.
Yes. Right. Okay. So you started writing and you wrote under a different name. But because I fell in love with your books, because I'm old. But I fell in love with your books back when they first came out in the 90s. And they were always so emotional.
Yeah.
and yet still, they still transported me as a reader to a
Oh,
world that I was, that I always wanted to learn more about. And the thing about you for me is that you made me cry. So I do forgive you for this.
thank you. I made myself cry. If you were crying, I was bawling too. The sad part about that, Sarah, is I knew what was going to happen and I was still crying.
Okay, so that gets me to my next point, is that when you were writing these, when you write your stories, do you know how it's going to end?
Yes.
Okay, always, or does anything ever like surprise you?
Once in a while, well, I never know what's coming out of a character's mouth. I
Uh-huh.
don't control the dialogue very often. I don't. Sometimes I have to go back and edit myself because I sound so Southern and sometimes kind of redneck and a little bit hillbilly. And so I have to go back and kind of edit my own natural voice, language
Yeah.
into my voice. But I see my books are like a movie in my head before I start. So I already know it because I dream them.
Okay, so you dream them. All right. So
Most
how
of them.
did,
Mhm.
yeah, so let's talk about The Next Best Day, because that book just came out. And what inspired it? Because it has a lot of elements in it that are happening every day,
Yeah.
unfortunately, in our lives.
Mhm.
So what was the inspiration for you to put this story down?
My daughter's the teacher. I come from a long line of educators. My grandmother and 4 of her sisters taught in one-room schoolhouses out on a prairie all over Oklahoma. My mother was a teacher. My daughter is a teacher. I have seen the evolution, and sometimes not for the better, of education. And I know what's happening in that world that not a lot of people do. You have to live within that world to understand the stresses and things like that and the level of what they're facing. And it's worse now for a teacher than it used to be. I won't get into the politics of why, but it is harder now to be a teacher in this nation. And everyone knows the horror of school shootings. And just before this book came out, my daughter's school was put in lockdown. Just like 6 weeks, 2 months after school started. And that was the scariest time for me, for her. I just got a message, Mom, we're in lockdown. We don't know where the shooter's at. And it was the most frightening time for me. And I already knew, but I was living it from that standpoint. And I thought, well, how odd that this happens right before The Next Best Day comes out within my own family. So I have firsthand knowledge of a lot of it. And as for the children with no parents, I think it's because I saw so much of it growing up. I worked as a secretary in public school for about 8-10 years. And I saw so many kids on the same level as Katie was. And as children are everywhere, there's foster children, there's children who aren't looked after, there's children who take care of their own little brothers and sisters. There's just a whole level of undercurrent, and it just so speaks to my heart. And that's where that book came from.
Well, you started out in Albuquerque and then you moved her to Tennessee. And I was like, when I was reading it, I was like, oh, wait, we're going through Oklahoma. Are we going to stop here? Because I know that's where you're from. And I was like, oh, well, at least she got to spend the night there.
Yes. I don't often put characters in Oklahoma. I have, but I don't often do that because it's it's too familiar for me. It,
Yeah.
it doesn't, I don't want to put back, I don't know. There's enough trouble in the world. I don't want to put my characters through crap in my own state.
State. Oh, okay. So my question was going to be is why did you pick Albuquerque as the big city and then Tennessee as the small town setting?
I've never written a book and set it in Albuquerque. I liked it. Well, maybe I have back in the day, but it wasn't set there for long. I wanted her to go from desert and city to rural, mountainous, and small town living. It's just the dichotomy of two different lives and lifestyles, and that's interesting to me.
Yeah.
And yet her whole world was still teaching.
Yes. And it was very, I mean, I found it very interesting. It was just the whole, like, she, in the beginning, by the time the first two chapters are done with, I think it was in the first two chapters when the shooting and everything is that you made me feel that Albuquerque was not a safe place.
Well, that's why I don't set stuff in Oklahoma. The truth is, and I say this to my daughter all the time, there's nowhere that's really safe in the world because your safety depends on someone else's free will and choice. And at any moment, you can accidentally walk into the wrong place at the wrong time. And so that's why I think you can't control your fate.
Yeah.
That's what I think. And it's just, it was not safe for her. It was still a beautiful city and she still had friends there and she loved them and she loved that school and she loved the children. It was so hard for her to leave them. But she wasn't safe there anymore in her mind. And that's how we all get, when something happens to us, then our faith and trust in that person or that place is forever changed. So Katie was the one who didn't feel safe. And as for the other aspect of what was going on in Albuquerque, that's in every big city. But rich people under the covers of one thing doing illegal stuff in another, that's not news.
No, that's rather ordinary, unfortunately.
It is.
Yeah. And the nice thing that I liked when we got to Tennessee, it was a small town, it's beautiful, it had flower beds.
Yes.
I can't have flower beds, I'm very jealous because I have rabbits.
Oh my God.
We're not going to talk about the rabbits.
Okay.
But anyhow, I feel strongly about the rabbits. Anyway, but the thing that I found interesting is that even though she felt safer in Tennessee, I mean, it was like a different, it was like, as you said, it was the trees, it was the mountains, it was a whole different climate even. And the whole thing, she felt safe there, but bad things were still happening, but they didn't seem to mess with her equilibrium. Like it took her a while to gain that back, to get the feeling of security, and Sam of course helped, but it was the whole thing of, you just laid it out so beautifully. I don't know how else to say that.
Thank you. Well, everybody, if you are a survivor, if you are a person who has survived trauma in their life and you keep bouncing back and bouncing back, inevitably, you're still going to be bouncing in the long run. And that change in perspective is what gave her the time she needed to bounce again. That's how I look at it.
Yeah. Let's talk about Sam.
Let's do.
Yes.
Wonderful.
He was wonderful. And then some of the thing about this book is that you had some really serious subjects matter there, but then you had some funny scenes. I mean, come on, the cat fight. Seriously. And so
in the flower bed.
the two women having a cat fight with, it was just, and there were other little pieces like the accidents and things like that. It was just like, so how did you get the stories for the small town chief of police to have to deal with? Because he dealt with lots of levels of evil, for lack of a better term, but he also had these like, hysterically funny. It was like, really?
I grew up in that. I grew up in the country, but yeah, and I was married and lived in rural central Oklahoma, but 2,500 population where my kids went to school, maybe during the Kolache Festival. It was just stuff. It's just normal stuff that we'd hear about, maybe not specifically, but I personally knew two people who got into an argument about one of them had gophers and one of them poisoned the gophers, and somebody else's cat got sick eating the gopher, and there was nearly a war on that block because of it. I knew people that did the weirdest things, and the police were always having to wade through it. There was a time period when I worked at City Hall, and I saw more stuff go through city court than you could even begin to imagine. I was a court clerk, and I had to sit there and listen to all that stuff. And my imagination can go way above what I was seeing and hearing anyway. So that's how writers are, we just do that. And I have my daddy's sense of humor. So there's that.
Well, it was very good. And I think that it was very necessary. I think that shows your skill and genius as a writer, actually, is that being able to talk about really tough subjects and then have little pieces of humor that liven it up a little bit so that you just keep going. And the two little girls were adorable, and they were very much children. So
yeah,
I'm going to compliment you on that.
Thank you. I will base them off the 3 granddaughters I helped raise.
Well, there you go. Mm-hmm. So and the one thing I know, because I follow you on Facebook, is that when things happen, you're always cooking and you show us pictures, which makes some people who don't cook and bake very jealous.
Well,
but
baking is my therapy.
Yes. So have you ever had the chocolate cupcake with the sprinkles?
Oh yeah.
Time with your granddaughters?
Oh God, yes. Our 2 most favorite things were always sugar cookies, so that they could put colored sprinkles, but we've done cupcakes and everything. A thing that's very unique within our family are the kolaches. That's a Czech sweet roll.
Yes.
And my daughter is 1/4 Czech. Her daddy was a first generation American. His mother came over from Prague, Czechoslovakia, actually a smaller town outside of it, but Czechoslovakia. Yeah. And so we learned to make, I learned to make kolaches when I was 10 or 12 years old, because everybody around made kolaches. And my granddaughters were always wanting to poke the little holes in the bread so you could put the filling or put the sprinkles on or something. So they always had their little fingers in the yeast dough or the sprinkles. And they learned to make kolaches with me when they were really little. And that was one of our fun things to do. We always baked together.
Yeah. Well, my grandmother used to make pies and sold them. And the part I remember the best was the leftover dough that was, that she cut away from the pan. Then we got to do anything we want with it, but we could put sprinkles of cinnamon and brown sugar on it, and we made our little the little twist, and then they would bake in with the pies, and they were always so good.
Yeah, my kids were so mad if I didn't have leftover pie dough.
Yes,
Yeah, they wanted their sugar, their cinnamon roll. Mama, did you save
Yeah.
stuff for cinnamon roll? That's what they call it.
Right. Yeah, that
Mhm.
was really good.
Yep.
Okay, well, we're down to where we get to quiz you, and I know that you look forward to
Absolutely.
this, right, Sharon? Okay, so we're gonna do the fresh fiction facts. So these are just off the cuff questions, and you
Okay.
answer them as quickly as possible.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so what is your favorite genre to read?
Mystery.
What is one genre you never want to read again?
Erotica, just because it's boring to me.
Okay. And do you remember who your first book boyfriend or girlfriend was?
Yes. Tarzan was my first book boyfriend, and the genre was always Westerns, Louis L'Amour.
Ah, yes. Yes. And I like Zane Grey too.
Oh, yeah, but Zane Grey was first. I'll take it back. Zane Grey was first, Louis L'Amour was second, but Westerns always.
Yeah. Okay. What is one luxury item or service that you can't live without?
Well, I have lived without it, but I sure do like getting a massage once in a while. It helps take all the kinks out of being a
Oh.
writer.
Yeah.
You know. Mhm.
Yeah, I could use a massage right now.
Yeah.
Okay.
At my age, it's almost beneficial.
It is. It's a medical necessity, all
Yes,
right?
ma'am,
So
I'll
it
tell
goes
myself
it
that.
goes beyond being luxury to being it's
Yeah.
a necessity, guys. You just have to
Yes,
understand
ma'am.
that. Yeah. So you told us that you have the whole story in your head. So do you consider yourself a plotter versus being a pantser?
Probably because the plot's already in my head, and so the whole story evolves around it. Yes, probably.
Okay. So if you ever had a chance to write with somebody, what would be your dream writer collaborator?
I'd
Oh,
lose
okay.
I'd lose my mind.
You it's like being by yourself, right?
I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
I have too much. I even get antsy when the book goes to editing, and I wonder what they're going to do with it, because my worst thing ever is when they change the title or want to or tell me I can't have that title, and I'm like, yes, I can. I have to, because the whole book was written around it. It's really awful for me when they change the title.
So when you start writing, do you come up with the title first and then the
Yep.
story, or you do? Okay.
Can't start the book till the title's on there first. It's just in my head that way. I don't know why. It's weird.
So you have the title, and then do you get the characters, or do the characters and
It's
titles all come
it's
all
all at
together?
once. I know the whole entire story, and then until I get the title in my head and the characters' names, I'm just sitting there waiting. And when I have
Okay.
that, I'm good to go.
Okay. So what is your favorite but most challenging secondary character to write? Not a main character, a secondary one.
No, the bad guy, making him believable without being over the top. That's a harder character to write, but they're also my favorites because they're characters, and I don't have to write love scenes with them. I want them to be believable. So I always say to myself, once upon a time, this character was a little bitty kid, and he never planned to grow up and be this kind of a person. So that's what I think about when I'm writing a bad guy.
So your bad guys are never like born evil, like some writers do that.
No.
It sounds like no.
I have, because that's like summoning demons, and I don't do that. I don't do that because I see ghosts anyway. I live with ghosts. I live with spirits, and I'm not writing about bad stuff. So yeah.
Yeah. Okay. What is the best advice, writing or not writing, that you've ever received?
Well, the best advice is, if you believe in yourself, don't quit.
Mhm.
And when it comes to writing, the best advice I ever got, and I still do this to this day, is never stop at the end, never quit writing for the day at the end of a chapter. Stop in the middle of an action scene or a love scene that you want to go back to write, because you will be anxious to sit down and get back at it, as opposed to saying, I don't know what comes next. Once I'm writing, everything flows. But so I always, when I go back the next day and open my file again, I go back to the chapter I wrote before I stopped and go back through it and edit as I go. And when I get to where I stopped, I'm already back in the whole story, and I don't have any pauses in my head or confusion as to what happens next. That's just me. But somebody suggested that to me, and it's worked like a charm.
Yeah, see, I have, when I sit down to read, I have to finish the book at that, when I sit down to read.
Yeah.
Because I can't leave those poor characters hanging somewhere.
Well, I have to be able to go back and finish it, like I should. Because I can procrastinate. Oh God, I can procrastinate till the last week when I've got 5 chapters to write or something like that. The last week of a deadline, I can just kill myself finishing it because I'll put it off. Because sometimes I don't want to write the love scene.
All right, so we're still talking about advice a little bit. What is the best advice you think you've ever given anybody?
To do with writing, or just to give to
in general,
somebody?
Maybe anything, writing or in general.
Don't give away your autonomy. Don't give someone else the power over your voice. Don't let someone else control your life. It's fine to have a partner, but they better be talking to me, discussing. They better not be telling me what to do. I'm 2 husbands behind on that because of it. I don't appreciate being somebody's slave.
That is great advice. Everybody should take that to heart because it's true.
Yeah. Your life, your choices. And if you get in a bad place, you have the choice to stay there, or you have the choice to change. But it's always your choice.
Well, we're almost finished our interview section, but as you came in, you got to see us playing the name game. And so I'd like you to play the name game. Can you tell us what you're reading, watching, and listening to right now? Or in the past week?
Yeah, okay. I haven't been reading the past week because I've been writing. I'm in the middle of book 4 of a new series that I'm doing for Source Books. So I'm in the middle of that. I haven't read, beyond newspapers and stuff. I always do my crosswords every day. I watch a lot of BritBox, and I have been watching a series called Shakespeare and Hathaway. It's mystery, but it's funny. But I have watched some really good mysteries on Prime and BritBox, and I like the series that have a lot of episodes. And I have been, one of my newer favorites was Reservation Dogs, that's set in Oklahoma. Very famous people. The director, I cannot pronounce his name, but he's a hot shot in Hollywood right now. It's a Polynesian name or something. And then the writer is also from Oklahoma, and they have just blown it out of the water. I also like Dark Winds. I watched that. I like that. I'm very Native American is very dear to my heart because both my grandmothers were part Native American. One was part Cherokee and one was part Cree Canadian. So, I've got that in my family history.
Okay. All right. Do you want so what is the next thing that you have coming out that people can look forward to? And then how can what?
I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
What is the next thing we can look for? I know you have a book coming out, I think in March. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
I do, but I have one before. I
Oh,
have,
okay.
yeah, I have, I was invited to participate in an anthology with Wolfpack Publishing. That's the big Western publisher in the country right now. And Mike Bray is the publisher, and he invited me, one of, I think there's 5 of us, women, to participate in a book called Rebel Hearts Anthology. And the timeline is set between, I forget, 1865 and 1890s or something, but it's within the Civil War era or whatever. And it's about a bad guy, or one of the man or the woman has to be like an outlaw or a rebel or an oddball, not, and it's how the man and the woman fall in love. And my story in that book is called Irish Kelly and the Heartbreak Kid. And it comes out December 20th. And the anthology name is Rebel Hearts Anthology. And I know Kat Martin participated, and somebody else that I know real well. And I'm just bad on names, but there's 5 of us that have a short story apiece in it. And mine is about a female, a woman who breaks horses, horse break.
A horse breaker. Okay.
She goes by the name Hank, and hardly anybody knows she's a girl, and they hire her to come break these horses. And then, they're like, oh my God, we got a girl. And there she is in pants and breaking horses and breaking hearts.
Okay, I wrote it down while you were talking, so I'll know to go and look for it. So it's the
Oh,
20th.
dude.
So that's like a nice Christmas present, right?
Yes. And the first book in March, the one you asked about, I'm sorry, that's the first book that will start another series that I'm doing for Source Books. It's set in a fictional town in the Cumberland Mountains called Jubilee. And think of it kind of like Silver Dollar City in Branson, where there's a town and that tourist attraction within it. So that's what that setup is. And it's all romantic suspense, and there's all kinds of stuff going on in that one. And the first title is Don't Back Down. And then after that is Last Rites, and then Heartbeat. And I'm writing number 4 right now, and that's called Left Behind.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Okay. And I almost forgot to ask, where can people find you besides Facebook?
Well, I cancel my Twitter. I'm on Instagram, but not very often. That's about it. But I'm on Facebook. I have very little time to play. And I have a website that's really cool. It's Sharon Sala at SharonSalaAuthor.com. And I'm also on Writer Space on Facebook too. I belong to that. So yeah, Writer Space or my website or Facebook.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. And we're going to open it up to questions from our readers.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.